People weave myths about them and write thrillers. They're accused of world conspiracies. But who are the Freemasons, really? A secret government of the planet or a club of aging gentlemen with obscure rites? In this video, we'll sort out how Freemasonry arose, where its symbols came from, and why in the 16th century, philosophers, kings, and revolutionaries strove to join. We'll tell you whom the Masons admitted and whom they refused to even hear, about the role of the lodges in the American and French revolutions, about scandals, bans, and legends. And most importantly, we'll make it to the present day. Do the Masons exist today? What do they do? And have their rituals truly survived into our digital age? Suggest topics for new videos in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Stories for Sleep come out here every day. Roots of secret unions. From cathedral guilds to the legends of Solomon's Temple. Somewhere deep in medieval Europe, among hills and forests veiled in dawn mist, stone walls slowly rose toward the sky. Where wooden chapels once stood, majestic cathedrals appeared, Gothic, pointed, reaching upward like a prayer made stone. These temples, which seemed the work of heavenly forces, were in fact created by human hands, by those who knew how to carve an arch from rough stone, how to raise an uncracking vault, and how to make weight take on grace. They were called Master Stonemasons, or Freemasons, free builders, not bound to a single city or lord. They held a special status. Their work demanded not only physical strength, but precise knowledge, strict discipline, and the ability to keep trade secrets. These were not passed down through books, but directly from master to apprentice, from mouth to ear, from hand to hand, through signs and rites. To enter their ranks, one had to undertake a long path, become an apprentice, withstand trials, earn trust, and only then be accepted into the brotherhood. These communities of masters across Europe were the forerunners of Freemasonry as we know it today. They were called guilds or crafts, each with internal rules, a charter, a hierarchy, and a court of honor. Every initiation was accompanied by an oath, not to reveal the secrets of the craft, not to let down one's fellows, not to allow outsiders access to knowledge. The hierarchy was strictly defined: apprentice, journeyman, master. Only after completing all stages could one gain recognition and freedom in the profession. Historians find traces of such brotherhoods as early as the 10th, 11th centuries. Builder guilds were especially active during the construction of the cathedrals of Chartres, Cologne, and Canterbury. These groups often traveled from project to project, lived apart, preserved corporate traditions, and, some researchers believe, already used a special system of signs to distinguish initiates from the uninitiated: gestures, handshakes, and ciphers. All of this, centuries later, would flow into Masonic symbolism. When Europe's grand building projects wound down and Gothic gave way to other styles, large construction guilds began to wane. At the same time, people with no link to building increasingly entered the brotherhoods. They were called accepted or speculative members, scholars, lawyers, philosophers, drawn by the atmosphere of ritual, the ideal of moral improvement, and the spirit of fellowship. Thus, operative craft masonry gradually turned into speculative masonry, based on symbols and philosophical categories. At the center of this new symbolic world lay an ancient legend with roots in biblical times. According to the story, an architect named Hiram was summoned by King Solomon to build the great temple in Jerusalem. Hiram possessed arcane knowledge, bearer of a secret word symbolizing the highest truth, and refused to reveal it to those who had not undergone initiation. 3 journeymen attacked and killed him, hoping to extract the secret. The myth ends with the master's body being found and symbolically raised, and his knowledge preserved in a new form, to be passed only to the worthy. This story became more than an allegory. It became a ritual. The themes of death and rebirth, the loss and search for the secret word, the struggle against ignorance and for inner discipline, all of this formed the foundation of Masonic symbolism. Although the legend of Hiram does not appear in the Bible in the form recounted in the lodges, it acquired the status of a spiritual basis for the system of degrees through which every Mason passes. The masters also spoke in a visual language. On the walls of many Gothic cathedrals, one can still find Mason's marks, unique signs carved on blocks. They served for accounting work, but may also, some researchers think, have played a role in internal recognition. We cannot be certain these marks were directly linked to later Masonic symbols, yet the idea of leaving a sign in stone readable only to brothers certainly connects those craftsmen to their spiritual heirs. By the end of the Middle Ages, written monuments appear in which one can discern the beginnings of Masonic philosophy. Best known are the Regius and Cook manuscripts. Both contain stonemason statutes, legends of the trade's ancient origin, and lists of moral injunctions: respect for religion and authority, honesty, modesty, diligence, brotherhood, and the duty to guard secrets. Already here, we see not only a profession, but a worldview in which building is a metaphor for inner perfection. In these texts, as in stone, the contours of future Freemasonry begin to show, a system where the temple ceases to be a structure of limestone and marble and becomes the image of the human soul, which each person must raise from virtues, knowledge, and self-restraint. Thus, from heavy labor, from the ring of hammers on stone, from the quiet of builders' chapels and evening gatherings of masters, was born an idea that outlived the cathedrals of its age and its empires. And when the guilds themselves began to disappear, their spirit did not. It merely changed, donning other forms. The Age of Enlightenment and the birth of the lodges. At the start of the 15th century, Europe gradually began to recover from bloody religious wars, dynastic conflicts, and epidemics. In the cities of England and Scotland, beneath tavern rafters, in university halls, and in freethinkers' studies, a new phenomenon took shape. A brotherhood united not by birth, creed, or wealth, but by spirit. This was Freemasonry. And in 1717, it took a step that transformed a constellation of scattered lodges into a single structure with a distinct face and recognizable philosophy. On 23 June 1717, in London's Goose and Gridiron Tavern, on the grounds of Old St. Paul's, representatives of 4 old lodges, until then acting independently, united to form the first Grand Lodge of London and Westminster, soon known as the Grand Lodge of England. From that moment, Masonry ceased to be purely a craft association and gained new content: philosophical, moral, and universalist. A crucial step was drafting its own constitutions. This task fell to Presbyterian minister and Mason James Anderson, who in 1723 published the Constitutions of the Freemasons. The document combined a mythic history from Adam, Noah, and King Solomon to the present, with moral and organizational principles such as belief in a creator God, moral virtue, obedience to the law, fraternal solidarity, and a ban on discussing religion and politics. Anderson's constitutions became the first universal charter of speculative Freemasonry and shaped it for centuries. The new Grand Lodge sought to unite people of diverse professions and views, rare in an age of rigid estate and confessional boundaries. Masons were not only former builders, but lawyers, physicians, aristocrats, merchants, publishers, mathematicians, and theologians. The lodge became a place where people divided by class and religion could be equal in spirit, conviction, and striving for truth. Figures such as Elias Ashmole and Robert Moray, linked to Masonry even earlier, are regarded as spiritual forerunners of the speculative movement. Their interests in alchemy, science, ancient traditions, and secret societies forming the cultural soil from which the new Masonry sprouted. Rituals of the time were simpler than today, but already contained hallmark elements: a 3-degree system, the compasses and square symbol, the legend of Hiram, dramatic elements, and moral parables. Masonry was seen as a path of inner improvement, with the temple not a church, but the human soul. Soon after the Grand Lodge's creation, the Brotherhood's ideas spread swiftly beyond England. By the mid-1720s, lodges operated in Ireland, Scotland, France, Germany, and Italy, adapting to national cultures and political situations, yet preserving a core spirit: universalism, ethics, brotherhood, and the pursuit of enlightenment. Scotland, where operative traditions lingered longest, reacted in its own way. Some old lodges did not recognize London's authority and developed their rituals independently. This divergence produced two lines, so-called moderns, leaning toward the English model, and ancients, advocating restoration of supposedly older rites. Their rivalry lasted until 1813, when the United Grand Lodge of England united both traditions. Meanwhile, in the 15th century, Masonry became part of the wide intellectual and moral revolution known as the Enlightenment. Enlightened monarchs such as Frederick II, writers like Voltaire, and scientists like Benjamin Franklin joined. Across Europe, lodges became venues not only for morals and symbols, but for reforms, ideas of human rights, science, education, and justice. Unsurprisingly, churches and absolutist regimes soon viewed Freemasonry with suspicion. In 1738, Pope Clement XI issued a bull condemning Catholic participation in lodges, citing secrecy and fears of undermining church and state discipline. Many bans followed across Europe, yet the Brotherhood did not disappear. If anything, its attraction grew for those seeking alternatives to dogma and harsh power. Some lodges focused on ritual and mutual aid, others became centers of civic discussion and intellectual resistance, everywhere holding to tolerance, humanism, freedom of thought, and personal growth. From a craft tradition emerged a philosophical order. From builders' gatherings, a network of intellectuals, and from internal signs, universal symbols of light and progress. Brotherhood and revolutions. Masons at history's turning points. In the 15th century, a brotherhood founded on ethical principles and philosophical self-improvement became inseparable from the tempests of its time. Though lodges were not political organizations and did not call for overthrowing monarchies, their atmosphere, reason, equality, personal responsibility, and liberty resonated with revolutionary spirits. Masons did not make revolutions directly, yet among those who changed the world, they appear strikingly often. In North America, amid rising tension between the colonies and Britain, Masonry became part of the cultural fabric of a nascent nation. Lodges existed in Boston, Philadelphia, New York, and Virginia long before the War of Independence. Among their members were men later counted among the Founding Fathers. One was George Washington, initiated in 1752. Though not consistently active throughout his life, he respected the Brotherhood and took part in public Masonic ceremonies, including laying the cornerstone of the Capitol, an act that cemented the association between Freemasonry and early U.S. history. Benjamin Franklin, scientist, publisher, diplomat, philosopher, joined in Philadelphia in 1731, became Grand Master of Pennsylvania, and later a key link between American and French Masonry.
In France, he participated in the famed Nine Sisters Lodge, which brought together scientists, artists, and philosophers. For Franklin, Freemasonry was a space for intellectual exchange and moral formation, inseparable from the aims of enlightenment. Historians stress that lodges did not organize the revolution as a single political body, yet the values proclaimed in the Declaration of Independence overlap with the spirit of the lodges. The very notion of civic virtue, often discussed in Masonic meetings, was integral to the new republic's ideology. In France, the context differed. Internal tension grew between crown, aristocracy, and the Third Estate. From the mid-15th century, French lodges became not only places of fraternal solidarity, but arenas for political and philosophical debate, admitting nobles, bourgeois, officers, and even clergy, those seeking alternatives to official church and court rhetoric. In the 1770s, one of the era's most influential lodges, named for the Nine Muses, was founded in Paris. Its members included astronomer Jérôme Lalande, sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdon, and Franklin. Shortly before his death, Voltaire took part in its ceremonies, an emblematic act for a philosopher who fought for reason, tolerance, and freedom. Approaching revolution, lodges expanded. Many future actors, Jean-Sylvain Bailly, the Marquis de Lafayette, and Camille Desmoulins, attended at various times. Robespierre, despite long debate, is not documented as a Mason, and today is generally considered not initiated, though many of his associates were. Masonry did not organize or direct the revolution, but ideals of moral improvement, equality regardless of birth, and peaceful brotherhood resonated with revolutionary France's slogans. During the Terror, however, Masonry found itself vulnerable. Some lodges closed, others dissolved or reorganized. Masons died on the guillotine as aristocrats, as revolutionaries, or simply as citizens in the wrong place. After the whirlwind subsided, Masonry recovered, but its image changed, becoming a symbol in the public imagination of hidden influence. Pamphlets and rumors birthed a conspiracy theory that would grow with each decade. The Brotherhood's reserve, secret rites, special terminology, and closed ceremonies only amplified the impression that something more lay behind courtesy and virtue. From then on, Freemasonry led a double life, real lodges acting by charter, and a projection of public fears, the shadow of a mysterious fraternity supposedly steering revolutions, banks, parliaments, and even religions.
Initiations, secrets, and symbols, the inner universe of Freemasonry. Freemasonry's most enduring essence is found not in parliamentary buildings or monuments to Masons, but behind lodge doors, in rites preserved for centuries. Initiation, symbols, and inner parables are not mere outer form. They are the foundation of the tradition, created not to govern society, but to work on the human being, personal, disciplined, unending. Initiation begins in silence. The candidate enters not as a member, but a guest, blindfolded, literally and symbolically. He proceeds along a path of questions, symbolic obstacles, and rites intended not to frighten, but to tune him for inward work. The blindfold signifies ignorance, the bare chest, openness, the rope around the neck, duty. These are not theatrics, but a language by which the lodge speaks to one beginning the path. The ceremony takes place in a special room called the Temple. The cardinal points, the placement of columns, and the stations of lodge officers are precise. In the east sits the master who presides. In the south and north, the wardens. The central space is kept free for movement, ritual, and work. Everything matters, every detail, object, and color. The central symbols are well known, yet layered with meaning. The compasses and the square together represent the ideal toward which every Mason should strive.
The compasses symbolize spiritual order, self-discipline, the power to set limits to one's actions. The square stands for precision, honesty, practical responsibility. Together, harmony between thought and deed. In English-speaking lodges, a letter G often appears between them, interpreted, depending on tradition, as God, geometry, or gnosis. On the continent, this symbol is often absent. The all-seeing eye within a triangle signifies not surveillance, but enlightened consciousness, conscience, the inner witness. The initiate receives Masonry's three great lights, a sacred book, the compasses, and the square. The book is not always the Bible. Depending on the lodge's religious and cultural setting, it may be the Quran, the Upanishads, or a philosophical text accepted as a symbol of truth. Masonry does not demand adherence to a specific faith, but requires recognition of a higher moral law. The rites are built around 3 degrees: entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason, each a symbolic world. The apprentice learns to listen and observe. The fellow craft gains access to geometric and moral concepts and begins to understand the symbolic temple. The master passes through the parable of Hiram, the architect slain by envy, yet whose wisdom is preserved and raised, signifying the death of the former self and rebirth into a new state of consciousness with responsibility for one's brothers and one's work. Many ritual images are ancient. 2 pillars at the temple's entrance hark back to descriptions of Solomon's temple and signify strength and stability. The gavel and chisel remind us that a person is a rough stone, and life's task is to hew from it something fit for higher building. The apron worn by initiates is a sign of labor and equality. In the lodge, prince and worker alike wear the same light apron. Speech has a special place. Much is transmitted orally. There are signs, passwords, and gestures used to recognize brothers, not to create secrecy as a barrier, but to protect the experience. Initiation is not a set of words, but a lived moment. Thus, it can only be passed on in person. History records many who passed through Masonic rites. Mozart belonged to a Viennese lodge, wrote music for lodge meetings, and drew inspiration from its ideas. His opera, The Magic Flute, is rich with symbols resonant with Masonic philosophy: the number 3, light and dark, 3 trials, the temple, wisdom and silence, an artistic expression of the inner search each Mason undergoes. Over time, rituals grew more complex, with higher degrees, especially in the Scottish and York rites, bearing titles such as Knight of the East or Prince of Jerusalem. Yet classical Masonry remains tri-degree. The rest are extensions. The main path runs through 3 steps: observation, understanding, action. Asked what the Mason's secret is, one might answer simply, not in signs, gestures, or rite, but in the fact that a person, regardless of time and place, can change, can be a stone that becomes a column, can be silent in order to hear, can see a symbol and read in it himself.
In the wake of the lodges, Freemasonry was no longer a local British phenomenon. In the 100 years after the first Grand Lodge's founding, it spread across Europe, took root in the Americas, entered the Ottoman Empire, and reached parts of Asia, wherever societies strove for enlightenment, moral self-improvement, and mutual support. Lodges found soil. Masonry did not impose a single model. Structure and symbolism adapted to each country's cultural and political conditions, while remaining true to an inner aim: uniting free people around ethics and self-development. In France, where lodges spread actively from the mid-15th century, Freemasonry quickly became part of the cultural and intellectual elite, taking on the traits of a philosophical club. Scholars, writers, officers, and officials met to discuss not only symbols, but reforms, morality, and politics. French lodges were keen to pair brotherhood with public benefit, charity, education, lectures. After the Revolution and a period of decline, French Masonry revived in a new form. In 1840, the Grand Orient of France, its main jurisdiction, was officially restored. The Brotherhood became less aristocratic, more bourgeois and politicized. Brothers included officials, lawyers, journalists, and teachers. Napoleon was not formally initiated, yet he knew of the Brotherhood and did not hinder it, using it as a channel of influence through family and close associates. His brother Joseph served as Grand Master of the Grand Orient of Italy. German Masonry developed differently, more spiritual and philosophical, closely linked with universities and Protestant intelligentsia. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe joined the Amalia Lodge and remained faithful to the Brotherhood throughout his life, seeing in it a path to inner purification and harmony. His diaries, letters, and literary works are filled with images of light, initiation, ascent. In Austria, Masonry blossomed under Joseph II, a supporter of measured reforms and freedom of worship, though lodges later faced restrictions and bans. In Italy, it was especially active in the 19th century Risorgimento. Giuseppe Garibaldi, symbol of unification, belonged to lodges in Italy, France, and South America, became Grand Master of the Grand Orient of Italy, and later an honorary head of various international rites, using the Brotherhood as a practical form of solidarity and organization in the struggle for freedom and independence. In Spain, as in France, Masonry bore a political tint. During the Napoleonic Wars, lodges discussed liberty, constitutions, and representation. In the 19th century, Spanish lodges split between Yorkists, favoring the British model, more liberal and anti-clerical, and Scottish Rite adherents, more traditional and monarchist. This competition took on political character. In Latin America, Freemasonry played a key role in independence movements. Simón Bolívar, liberator of Venezuela, Peru, Colombia, and Bolivia, attended lodges and surrounded himself with brothers. His republicanism, discipline, and civic virtue align with Masonic principles. In Mexico, lodges accompanied the struggle for independence and the shaping of republican identity. They divided into York and Scottish camps, a split that fueled political polarization. Benito Juárez, lawyer, reformer, president, used the Brotherhood both as personal support and as a channel to spread ideas of a secular state, independence from the church, and educational development. In Eastern Europe, development was slower. In the Russian Empire, stable lodges appeared in the 1730s under Anna Ionovna, with a particular rise under Catherine II and Alexander I. Enlightener, publisher, and philanthropist Nikolai Novikov became a central figure, organizing presses, issuing moral religious literature, creating a network of lodges that combined symbolic work with practical activity, prison reform support, charity, and education. Masons were among the Decembrists. Though the 1825 conspiracy cannot be called Masonic, the lodge's atmosphere formed an intellectual school for young officers who believed they could change their country. Masonry also reached the Ottoman Empire. By the 19th century, lodges existed in Istanbul, Izmir, and Salonika, uniting various peoples and faiths, Jews, Armenians, Greeks, Turks, and serving as spaces for dialogue, translation of European works, and social activity. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk is sometimes named among Eastern Masons, though his membership remains debated. By the 20th century, Freemasonry had become truly global. Lodges in India, the Philippines, Japan, China, Egypt, adapting while preserving a common essence: work on yourself, the search for truth, service to society through personal betterment. Often, lodges were the first spaces where people of different religions, nations, and classes met as equals. But as the network widened, accusations grew.
Secrecy, closed doors, universality, all stirred suspicion. Masonry became a target for persecution, allegations, and bans. Bans, exposés, and the hunt for Masons. From its beginnings, Freemasonry evoked not only curiosity and admiration, but fear, distrust, and suspicion. What happened behind lodge doors turned in the public mind into something sinister and dangerous. Secrecy, elevated to a principle, inevitably worried those who sought to control not only bodies but thoughts. Already in the 15th century began a chain of prohibitions, suspicions, and persecutions that shadowed Masonry along much of its path. In the mid-15th century, Pope Clement XII issued a bull formally condemning Masonic lodges, not only for religious differences, but above all for closed meetings and oaths of mutual fidelity independent of the Church. Some 20 years later, Pope Benedict XIII reaffirmed the ban. From then on, Catholic participation in Masonry was considered a sin punishable by excommunication. Nor was the Vatican alone in seeing a threat. In many European monarchies, especially absolutist ones, lodges were viewed as seedbeds of free-thinking and dangerous ideas. In France, restrictions arose even before the Revolution. In Austria, Emperor Joseph II, despite his enlightened image, limited the number of lodges and placed them under supervision. In Prussia and Russia, the situation depended on the ruler. Catherine II was initially curious, but after the French Revolution turned hostile. Under Paul I, lodges were largely pushed from public life, and under Nicholas I, their activity became impossible. The 19th century saw fear take on mass paranoia forms. In the United States, the anti-Masonic Party emerged in the late 1820s, born of the disappearance of William Morgan, who had threatened to publish an exposé of lodge rituals. In 1826, Morgan vanished. Though no proof of murder surfaced, the public was certain the Masons had done away with him. The scandal sparked waves of distrust, and the first U.S. political movement built on fighting Freemasonry. Across Europe, tracts and pamphlets multiplied, portraying Masons as part of a global plot, running kings, revolutions, newspapers, even religions. Such ideas later fed far-right movements and fascist propaganda in the 20th century. Catastrophe struck under totalitarian regimes. In Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler immediately listed Masonry among the Reich's secret enemies. By 1935, all German lodges were dissolved, archives seized, members arrested. Masons, like Jews and political opponents, were sent to concentration camps, marked with a blue triangle. In fascist Italy, Mussolini banned lodges in 1925. Though he briefly flirted with Reformed Masonry, he chose hard centralization, where no independent brotherhoods could exist, supported by the Church, while some old lodges went underground. In the Soviet Union, Masonry was equated with bourgeois ideology. After 1917, nearly all lodges closed. Many members emigrated or were repressed. Under Stalin, Mason became synonymous with enemy of the people, Western spy, plotter. Yet even then the Brotherhood survived. Some lodges met in secret, others revived in exile. In Paris, London, New York, diaspora Masonic communities from Russia, Germany, Poland, Italy preserved traditions, rewrote lost rituals, and kept continuity alive. Through them, Freemasonry endured its darkest century. By the late 19th century, as totalitarian regimes fell, Masons returned to public space in Eastern Europe. Lodges reopened, archives were studied, once dangerous topics returned to discourse. But the memory of persecutions and fear remained. Even today, despite greater openness, Masonry retains caution, knowing that behind the lodge door there may not stand a petitioner, but an accuser. Masons and culture.
from Mozart to Dan Brown. Over time, Freemasonry ceased to be only a closed brotherhood with rites and symbols. It entered culture as inspiration, form, and object of artistic reflection. Through music, literature, and painting, Masonic aesthetics, mythology, and philosophy entered European and world culture, leaving traces noticed mostly by the attentive. Mozart's The Magic Flute, written near the end of his life, is suffused with symbolism resonant with Masonic rites. Architecture, too, served Freemasonry, literally the stone on which the order's aesthetics rest. In many European cities, especially in Britain and France, buildings carry pediments, pilasters, arches with encoded Masonic symbols. London's Grand Lodge building in Covent Garden is a prime example. Its proportions, pediment, and halls filled with allusions to stonemason symbolism and mystical geometry. In the painting of the 18th and 19th centuries, Masonic themes abound. Jacques-Louis David, famed classicist and lodge member, produced works on stoicism, sacrifice, and virtue that many saw as visual embodiments of Enlightenment and Masonic morals. Many writers openly acknowledged membership. Goethe, among the Germany's leading intellectuals, not only was a Mason, but wove into his works philosophical motifs inspired by lodge teaching. Faust is not only a tale of a bargain with the devil, but an allegory of a spiritual path, enlightenment, knowledge, trials, personal transformation, motifs close to Masonic thought. The 20th century brought Masonic themes into mass culture. Early cinema toyed with secret society imagery. True revival came with Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code and later The Lost Symbol, bestsellers that stirred curiosity about rites, ciphers, myths, and supposed hidden influences. Though criticized for liberties and exaggeration, Brown undeniably returned Masonic themes to popular culture, from news columns to tourist tours of Masonic sites in Washington or Paris. Films like National Treasure, cartoons, comics, even music videos exploit the compasses, the triangle, white gloves, and secret meeting scenes. This aesthetic has become part of the 21st century visual vocabulary, even when most viewers don't know its origin. Freemasonry is not only a cultural motif or fodder for sensation. In some countries, lodges support museums, libraries, theaters. France has a network of Masonic museums. In the U.S., some lodges fund scholarships in the humanities. Thus, the Mason's image lives on in cultural memory, not as a menacing conspirator's shadow, but as part of intellectual history where aesthetics and ethics are inseparable.
The Brotherhood today. Secrecy, continuity, and the century's challenges. If a person from the time of the French Revolution found himself in our world, he would be astonished not only by electric light, rapid trains, and digital devices, but by the simple fact that Masonic lodges still exist, still meet, admit new members, discuss moral questions, and conduct rites inherited from the 15th century. Freemasonry did not disappear, it adapted. Today, it is an international community numbering hundreds of thousands worldwide. In the United States alone, there are about 1 million Masons, far fewer than in the mid-20th century. In the United Kingdom, there are roughly 200,000. In countries such as Brazil, India, Germany, the Philippines, and Nigeria, national Grand Lodges operate, often recognized by or cooperating with so-called regular lodges of the Anglo-Saxon tradition. Despite varied contexts and cultures, the basics remain: ethics, brotherhood, personal improvement, and spiritual growth. The modern Mason is usually not an architect of stone nor a revolutionary, but a doctor, lawyer, engineer, entrepreneur, or teacher. He regularly attends lodge meetings, pays dues, participates in charity, and follows a charter requiring honesty, tolerance, and a striving for knowledge. Some lodges hold public lectures, maintain websites, record podcasts, conduct tours, and even publish annotated translations of old rituals. And still,
secrecy remains to a degree, especially where societies are wary of any non-public associations. In Turkey, Egypt, and parts of Latin America, members often avoid publicity for fear of persecution or censure. In Saudi Arabia, Iran, and North Korea, Freemasonry is officially banned. Even in stable democracies, it often faces conspiracist attacks. Italy has seen repeated political scandals. One notorious closed association counted generals, politicians, officials, and businessmen. Documents revealed in the early 1980s suggested ties to corruption and efforts to undermine democratic institutions, damaging the Brotherhood's reputation. Since then, official Masonic bodies emphatically distanced themselves from politics. Beyond politics, other problems loom. In most countries, the average member is over 60. Younger generations are slow to join, seeing little relevance in an age of social media, instant messaging, and open access to information, where joining a semi-closed society with long rites can feel archaic. Masons know this. Some lodges adapt: modern communications, thematic clubs, and orientation toward intellectual discussion. There are success stories. In the U.S., lodges composed entirely of musicians, programmers, actors, or military. In Japan, lodges blending Western ritual with Shinto and Zen traditions. In France, Belgium, and Latin America, active adogmatic lodges that admit atheists and center rites not on belief in a supreme being, but on humanism and freedom of thought. Yet amid all diversity, the essence remains not power and not conspiracy, but self-knowledge. As one modern Grand Master put it, Freemasonry is a school of ethical adulthood. In a society where everything accelerates, it offers a pause. Where everything grows superficial, it calls for depth. Where the world divides, it reminds us of brotherhood. The Masons have survived bans, revolutions, wars, crises, and scandals. They lost influence but kept the rights. They ceased to be a hidden lever of politics and remained a school of inner work. Perhaps people no longer fear them, and precisely because they no longer fear, they have begun to listen again.